So much information and so little time. Hi everyone and welcome. Today we're going to take a look at a few ways you can use digital tools to enhance and develop your study habits. Now, you've come this far in your academic career, so you've definitely developed a good sense of what works and what doesn't work for you while studying. What I'd like to take a look at today is how you can begin thinking more about the way in which you think and learn. Visible thinking happens when you speak, write, or draw your ideas. And it's really through this process that you're not only able to deepen your cognition and understand your content, but also share your ideas with others. Thinking through issues is not a solo endeavor. But a lot of times, thinking happens mostly in our heads, invisible to others, and really sometimes even to ourselves. As effective thinkers, when making your thinking visible, you're able to externalize your thoughts through speaking, writing, drawing, or whatever other method it is that you might prefer. You can then direct and improve upon these thoughts and reflect upon them as you continue your learning journey. By making your thinking visible, you're opening up the door to conversations about your learning, allowing team members to share and build on one another's knowledge, deepening your overall knowledge, and strengthening your skills and your ability to apply what you've learned in the field. Many of you have been using iAnnotate and Evernote to house your lectures and your notes. One of the greatest missed features in both these applications is the ability to tag your notes. Tagging allows you to create connections between pieces of information, chunking it and getting it ready to be stored in your long-term memory. Tagging is a proactive way to review your notes. It forces you to go back and look for common themes and topics. So if there's something that you haven't been doing along the way, no need to worry. Go back and take this as an opportunity to review and organize your thoughts around the ideas that are presented in your notes. There is no right or wrong tag, and as you sort through the information, you'll find connections that are meaningful and make sense to you. Next time you meet in your study groups, share the tags you've chosen and explain why. As you talk about your decisions, you'll further reinforce the ideas, all while sharing with your peers. At the end of the conversation, you may even have some new tags to add into yours. Tags may also be modified as you progress through the program. Ultimately, they are there to help you retrieve information at a moment's notice. Organizing and tagging your notes early on will also help you down the line as you get ready for your clerkships and as you prepare to take your board exams. Now, Quizlet's a tool I know that many of you are familiar with already, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just in case you haven't heard of Quizlet, Quizlet is a great way to create flashcards to review anywhere and anytime, but best of all, on any device. What's great about Quizlet are the multiple study modes you can choose from. They've even got some games for you to play. And best of all, again, these flashcards can be shared. So next time you're waiting in line for coffee, or you're at the airport getting ready to board a flight, think about taking out your Quizlet and reviewing some of your flashcards. One of the things that I've noticed that many of you do is use the whiteboard to review and study. This is a great way to reinforce concepts and ideas, and best of all, make your thinking visible. But what happens when you run out of whiteboard space? What happens when you're ready to go home? All of your hard work gets erased. There are a variety of digital tools that serve as whiteboards ready for you to begin making thinking visible, all while being saved for further review and refinement. One of my favorites is Explain Everything. It is through this process that you'll be able to learn. You'll also be able to identify your strengths and weaknesses, therefore refining your study habits to achieve higher results. What's great about Explain Everything is that you can save your whiteboard creations as images, or you can create a screencast and record your thoughts as you're drawing them. If you like, you can even do a summary of what you've created. Another idea for those of you who do enjoy using the whiteboards in the room and the markers, you can take pictures of them with your camera. You can then import these into Explain Everything and record your ideas. Again, these are all shareable, so think about how you and members of your study group can best use your time to learn and share. When you're done, put these into your Evernote notebook and tag them for future reference. Sketchnoting allows you to create a visual representation of your notes. At first glance, this may seem rather daunting, and you may immediately think, I'm not good at drawing, so this will never work for me. Like the other tools we've talked about, it's about your individual process and how you choose to make sense of the information presented to you. Don't worry about what another person's notes look like. Look at how organizing information makes sense to you. Here is a great video on how to begin sketchnoting.
Hi everyone, it's Brad O'Neill Carter, ADE Class of 2010 in Vancouver. You might have noticed that we've introduced sketchnoting as a complement to the offsite experiences planned for us in San Diego. And that's because sketchnoting is more about looking closely and listening carefully than it is about drawing. And knowing that on these offsite experiences there'll be some amazing things to see and some fascinating people to listen to, sketchnoting seemed like the right tool to take with us when we go out in the field. Now, I've been sketchnoting for about 2 years, and come to think of it, the first sketch notes I made and shared were at an Apple Leadership Summit back in 2012. And I was getting my sketchnote kit ready for San Diego, and Max Judd and Don Henderson asked if I'd make a little video sharing some of the things I've learned along the way. So here it is, some practical tips and some tricks. I hope these help you put your sketchnote kit ready for San Diego. Here's a very old sketch note I made. In fact, one of the sketch notes from that leadership summit I mentioned. This is Chip Heath talking about change management. Now, I've shared it with you for a couple of reasons. The first, I think the most important step in getting going in sketchnoting is that you need to get rid of that internal editor, the one that says, I can't draw, somebody else's picture is better than my picture, it'll never look right. The whole point of sketchnoting is, well, it's notes. It's not supposed to be a piece of art. It's supposed to help you remember and interpret what you saw, and they're very personal. Nobody else needs to understand this except you. The second reason is to show you that sketchnoting is a learned skill. This is what I was drawing like 2 years ago, and this is what my drawings look like today. So, how do we get from something that looks like this, the dreaded blank page, to something that looks like this? This is the second page of a sketchnote I was making at David Weinberger's keynote at Alan November's Building Learning Communities last year. Now, all sketchnotes, even a fairly complex one like this, really only have 5 elements on the page. There's text. You can see I'm using different fonts here and there. There are boxes or containers that hold text. There are lines and arrows. And there are these doodles, the things that make sketchnotes sketchy. I suppose that's not quite the right word, but I think you know what I mean. And lastly, there's layout or flow to the page. And it's not always obvious, but there has to be a bit of thinking about where you're going to put things. This one uses a bit of a narrative flow, and I've marked the order of the presentation with this red arrow. The first thing I want to do is move this title block up to the top of the page. So it looks like this. And the reason is, yes, I want to clear some space so I can draw. But already I'm starting to think about the layout of the page. Where am I going to put the first element of my drawing? Almost all presentations, movies, lectures, meetings come down to one of these 3 layouts. Most of the time, people are going to be speaking in a narrative. They're going to say, first this happened, then this happened, and finally that happened. In which case, you want to think about laying out your page like this, where you start up here and finish somewhere down here, although sometimes it can go in a circle if you know it's fairly short. The other common one is short topics. This is not uncommon in a meeting, for example, when we have 3 agenda items to cover. So the first set of drawings will start here, the next one something like the middle of the page, and the last one there. And finally, if there's some brainstorming, some free thinking, you're just throwing down ideas or you're culling key points from a presentation, notes just get put anywhere on the page, and it doesn't really matter where you begin. Here's an example of flow. You saw one with the David Weinberger presentation. This is Bill Frakes speaking at the ADE Global event last summer. And I've added these bullet points in here to give you an idea of the flow, but this is a narrative one. Here's an example of these short topics. This is Jim Sill, a great videographer. And he had 3 distinct ideas he wanted to talk about, so I decided I would start my page like that. And finally, here's an example of a free thinking layout where ideas are just spread around the page in no particular order. It doesn't matter which one you come to first. So for this sketchnote, I'm going to take that short topics format. I mentioned there were 5 elements to sketchnoting. We've spoken about layout. And next I want to talk about text, boxes, lines and arrows, and doodles. And I think it's going to be easiest if I lay my page out by presenting one topic there, and one there, and so on. Now that we've got the layout decided, The first thing you'll put down on the page is going to be text, and I recommend you start with 4 very simple fonts. Things that your hands know already: a lowercase, a script, an all caps, and this double riser, which is the same as this one except the vertical stroke has an extra line. And the reason is this: sketchnoting actually puts a pretty heavy cognitive load on the brain. Normally when we take notes, it's a very passive experience. We just copy down as literally as we can what we're seeing and what we're listening to. And if we're good note takers, at the end of that, perhaps when we get home at the end of the day or on the weekend, we'll review the notes, think about them, process them then. Sketchnoting inverts all of that. All the processing happens first before you put a single thing down on the page. So you want to have your brain free to be thinking about what's important and what's not. When I sketchnote, I only write down what resonates for me and things that I don't know. And even then, it's only non-trivial data. If I can look it up, or if I know I can contact the speaker for more information later, I don't bother with it. I want to capture the big ideas, the big level concepts, and connect them to information I already know. Something like this, for example, looks terrific, but it takes a fair bit of brain power to create, and while your brain is engaged in the drawing, you're not able to focus on what's going on in front of you. So if you want to do something like this, I recommend you leave space in your sketchnote to complete it later, or better still, do it in advance of your sketchnoting. So here are the 4 font faces at play, and a couple of things to note. One, you can use the change in fonts just to create some visual interest. The fonts themselves become something like drawings. And I'll change the font within a single sentence, here for example, where we switch from script to this all caps thing. And then you'll note that there's no sort of hierarchy on this page as there is in typical note-taking, where we have maybe A.1, A.1.A. That the way you use fonts helps you show emphasis. I use all caps to draw my eye to the page. You can see this word trivial pulls my eye in the middle of all of this script here. And I use this double riser thing for really big ideas that I want to take away. This idea of crap detection connected to some work I was doing at my school. And I hadn't really spent much time on Reddit, and Weinberger spoke highly of it, so I thought I want to come back to it later. The next element is boxes, the containers that hold text. Boxes are pretty simple to draw, just 4 lines for a box like that. But I still recommend you come up with a half dozen or so standards that you use regularly. And that's because the box itself can convey information aside from the words that are inside it. So I use this rectangular box with a drop shadow as a label. That's when I need to name something. Could be a place on a map, could be a name stuck on a face. Anytime where I would use a sticky label on something, I use one of these ones. I have this cloud thing that I use for questions and uncertainties. That might be something I need to follow up with on the speaker. It might be something that I didn't quite capture and need to do some more investigating with, or a line of inquiry that I want to pursue when I get back to work. And kind of the opposite thing, I use this fireworks or starburst pattern for challenging ideas, things that I thought were provocative, or maybe I need to go and challenge the speaker with afterwards. I have a bullet. These are handy for marking out sequence or key points. A speech bubble. We'll talk a little bit more about those when we come to the doodle section of this. And finally, something to make a sidebar. If you have a little side note that you don't want to have the drawings cluttering up your main illustration, these are handy to have. They're all quick to draw. I don't have to think about them. They become kind of a grammar or standard that I can use to help add meaning to my drawings. Oh, and just a quick note about color. Generally it doesn't matter, but there are a couple of places where I use colors consistently. And one of them is in these labels. I always make them yellow. That's just an arbitrary choice, but it allows me when I scan through to look for these yellow boxes and know that I'm looking for names of people and places. And these purple bullets, I don't know why I use purple either, but I very rarely use it in my other drawings. And again, when I come back to my notes, I can scan through and find the key points. And finally, these two here. I like gray because it's kind of fuzzy and neutral. It's leaving things open. And these fireworks or starburst things here, I always color in some kind of hot orange or pink or something like that, again, to help them jump off the page. Here are some sample boxes. This is from Nancy Duarte's keynote at ADE Global last year. Here's a label. Probably need it because I'm not sure you'd recognize Nancy from my sketch note. I've put all of this stuff in one of those sidebar boxes. This is where I hold the title of the event. And I use a little speech bubble to have Nancy tell us a little bit about what she's about. You can see some bullets here that show a sequence of ideas, and a little fireworks thing to highlight some ideas. You can also create a box just by simply drawing a line on one side and using the outside edge of the page. I use this a lot to create a footer that can contain information, the title of the presentation, or the location where it occurred. The next element is lines and arrows. These kinds of things are fine, but they tend to get lost on the page. So I recommend that when you're drawing a line, you give them some kind of embellishment, something that makes them stand out. In any case, lines do two things. One, they separate things. We might want to put some information off to the side. And they connect ideas. Because there's no hierarchy on this page, you might have to connect an idea that comes 15-20 minutes into a presentation to something that happened at the beginning. And that's where you'd use a line. Arrows provide emphasis, point you to a particular place on the page. And I also use them to show sequence or flow. They're really handy for making timelines, for example. Arrows are also really good at either emphasizing or creating a narrative where there wasn't one before. I'd set this out as short topics, but perhaps I want you to think about this in some kind of sequence afterwards, so I can add this arrow that asks you to go through in this order if you were to come back to this page later. Now we've talked about layout and text and boxes and arrows, and that leaves us with doodles, the most difficult and intimidating part of sketchnoting. Let's start with a fresh page. I want to change the layout. I'm going to use that free thinking one and just doodle anywhere on the page. And as I said with boxes, there are kind of an infinite number of doodles you could do, of course. But it helps to have a standard set, something again that is kind of memorized in your fingertips and to free your brain up to do the high-level conceptual work. And the first category of things I think we can use are things that go. Cars and trucks are great things because, one, they represent literally a car, but you can use them to show other things, transportation, traffic networks, getting from A to B, and so forth. When you're drawing a car or a truck, the first thing you start with is the wheels. That kind of establishes the ground level for you. Then add the body. And with all this sketchnoting, it helps to think of cartoonish kinds of things. Try thinking of the way you used to draw when you were a kid. Again, sketchnoting is not an artistic representation, it's a conceptual representation, and goofy drawings free you up from trying to get it perfect and get you focused on the concept rather than the literal object. Trucks start out a lot like cars, except I give them a double set of rear wheels. And I like trucks too because you can put things in them and show a whole other set of ideas. Commerce, transportation, smuggling, anything like that could be done by putting objects in the back of a truck. And you can create even more complex ideas by using any of these illustrations you make as kind of rubber stamps, repeating them over. And that creates another idea. Here we have either traffic congestion, pollution, noise pollution, smog, anything like that. You can add speed to a vehicle by giving it little squiggly wheels like this and leaning everything a little bit to the direction of travel. That conveys the idea of motion. The other set of things that go are things that fly, and these are the four that I use most frequently. And of these, the airplane is probably the most important. I use that to show speed, to show covering great distances, to show travel from, say, Vancouver to San Diego on a map. I like these rockets here. They show maybe more advanced travel, human curiosity, space travel, that kind of thing. And you can flip it around and turn it into a weapon, which allows us to discuss the ideas of war and conflict and political struggle. And lastly, some kind of spaceship. I could use all of these to show some kind of progress in transportation or technology as well. It's worth spending some time to learn to draw a globe quickly with different sections of the continents showing. This you can use for all kinds of things. You can combine it with an airplane to show travel. You can put lines of latitude and longitude on it to show geography. And if you combine it with a label, you can show location. Along with a globe and things that go, there are a handful of doodles or icons, I guess, that I use regularly. Probably most often this pocket watch, which I use to show the idea of time in general, but also to mark a specific appointment, for example. Paper and books are handy both to represent the literal objects of, say, a report or a report card, but also to suggest the idea of knowledge. And they make a good contrast to something like an iPad or an iPhone, which is also a nice thing for representing the idea of technology itself. Something that represents video, we work a lot with video these days. A fire is handy both as a place for gathering people around, but also to show contrast or development. I could put a log fire next to a plane, to a rocket ship, and to a spaceship and convey the idea of advancing technology. Social media icons, one or two of them. Something that shows Wi-Fi, another piece of sophisticated technology. Again, I could combine a clock, a book, an airplane, an iPad, and some Wi-Fi and give an idea of how technology is evolving. And finally, this one, not so much the solar system itself, but the idea of negative drawings, of doing something black and reversing the white out. That becomes handy just to develop some contrast. Now, so far these are inanimate things for the most part, and those seem to be fairly easy to draw. It seems to get increasingly difficult as we move to animate things. So let's start with a simple way to draw a few animals. It helps to think in geometries. Creatures are just built up of very basic shapes that we already know how to draw. A cow, for example, is a rectangle with a little kind of truncated triangle on the end and just some commas for legs, tail, and horns. A horse is the same, except I've made the legs longer, the tail longer, and the head longer. You can even draw very exotic animals using the same idea. Here's the rectangle, triangle, triangles here, and little commas for legs and tail, and I've created something kind of exotic. Drawing human beings seems to be the most challenging part of sketchnoting, but if you can draw a stick person, you can draw a sketchnote person, and all you need to do is give her joints. Here she is with elbows, knees, and ankles, and already you can see how she's come alive. And what's cool about it is I haven't had to learn anything new or technical. I'm still using the same circle and straight lines. So now, if you want to make her do an action, you just have to close your eyes and imagine how the joints and limbs would be positioned. Then by adding a few extras, a pointer and a green board in the background, I can turn her into Sketchnote Teacher. So we had Sketchnote Teacher, here's Sketchnote Chef. And you can create all kinds of professions just by adding a few little extras, like the chef's toque, a knife, and a frying pan. And that not only conveys the idea of chef, but we could use that same illustration to show the idea of food or cuisine or something like that. When you feel comfortable drawing stick people, you can try on this and give them some clothes and a little depth and color to add some more interest to your sketch notes. I like these so-called star people as well because I can use them to quickly draw a crowd. Something like this or this is great to show an individual character or the idea of teaching. But when you want to draw a crowd quickly, star people are the way to go. Finally, you can develop some kind of signature character or style. I call these guys my Gumby people, and I like them a lot because they're super bendy and I can make them do all kinds of things. And it's fun, too. One of the things I love about the sketchnote community is that people develop a signature style or character for themselves. Now, this is my letter of introduction to Matthias Vestergaard, another sketchnote artist I met online. One last word of advice, keep a couple of pages for sketching. Now, most of the ideas here are too complex to show up in a sketch note. They just take too long to draw. But in playing around on these pages, I can come up with ideas that I can use. Here, for example, are the labels that I like to use now. And this fellow here was a character I saw in an art magazine, and I copied down as faithfully as I could, and he eventually became my Gumby people. This is also a good place to work on getting rid of that internal editor. One of the things I like to do is draw things that don't exist, and that way nobody can tell me whether or not my drawing is a good one. Like, what on earth is dinosaur love? I have no idea. And this one, I swore I overheard somebody walking down the street saying they were looking for a bouquet of pandas. I'm sure they weren't, but I thought I'd draw it, and who can tell me that that's not what it looks like? And this one was a challenge from Rashan Richards at South by Southwest last March, where he asked people to draw a duck with a green scarf skipping a rope. So here, in brief summary, are all the elements of a sketch note. Layout, text, boxes, lines and arrows, and the sketchnote doodles. I hope that gives you some material to work with to get yourself ready for San Diego. Really looking forward to seeing everyone there. I'll also be around Monday morning for a part of our masterclass Monday, and around for some drop-in labs when we're there. All the best.
Try it out as a way to review each module. You'll have created quite a valuable collection at the end, and you can put these back into Evernote and again tag them for future reference. Let's go ahead and recap what we talked about. Number 1, be organized. Come up with a plan that works for you and continue to build and refine it as you go. Number 2, be proactive. Don't leave all of the studying for the last minute. Consider doing a screencast using Explain Everything after each lecture to summarize your notes. Create a sketch note at the end of each module. Make flashcards as you go. And above all, don't forget to tag everything as you go. Number 3, connect and collaborate. Having a good study group to share your ideas with and have conversations with about the content is a great way to reinforce ideas and deepen your learning. Last but not least, make thinking visible. Don't let all the ideas stay hidden in your head, where sometimes even you don't know what they are. Bring them out into the open, recognize your strengths and weaknesses, and share your learning with others. Best of luck to you all, and as always, if you have any questions, feel free to come see me anytime.